In the center of the Elorian Empire, there was a rule that no one questioned. The princess must never remove her mask. It was golden, shaped like a delicate bird, and covered her face from forehead to chin. No one, not even servants, guards, or a royal family had ever seen her real face. They called her Princess Vela. And her name meant Hidden One. People whispered stories about her. Some said her face was cursed. Some said anyone who saw her true face would die within 3 days. Others believed she had no face at all, just a shadow, a ghost. So when the royal council announced that the princess was ready for the ancient bonding ceremony, Galaxy listened. Every powerful race sent suitors, warriors, princes, and leaders to the grand court. But one by one, they all refused to bond. Without seeing her face first, and one by one, they disappeared shortly after. No one knew why. But the message was clear: look behind the mask, and you vanish. The palace halls were silent now. Filled with fear, no one wanted to be the next fool. No one wanted to test the curse until a strange voice echoed across the court floor. I will bond without seeing her face. The crowd turned, gasped, and stepped back. A human, tall and calm, stood at the center of the throne room. His clothes were simple, his eyes serious, and his voice didn't shake. He had no guards, no army, no titles, just courage. The alien nobles began to whisper, "Is he mad? Doesn't he know?" The stories. He's just a human, he won't last a day. But the human didn't flinch. He looked at the masked princess as if she were no different than any other woman. And then he repeated himself. Louder this time, I will bond without seeing. Her face, the king stood, his voice cold. You know the risk, human. If you touch her, bond with her, and something happens. Your death is your own. We will not protect you. The human simply nodded. I understand. Princess Vela sat still on her throne, her mask hiding her reaction. But her hands trembled slightly in her lap. This was the first time anyone had spoken those words without fear. She tilted her head toward him, but said nothing. She was not allowed to speak before the bonding began. The court was silent, waiting. Everyone expected her to deny him. To stop this foolish human from getting hurt. But then she stood, slowly, gracefully. She walked toward the man. She held out her hand. Gloved in silver threads, he took it. Gasps filled the room. It had begun. The bonding ceremony would be complete by morning unless either of them backed out. But the human didn't back out, and neither did she, later that night. When the court was empty and the stars above the palace glowed bright, the human sat in a guest chamber. Alone, a soft knock came at the door. When he opened it, the masked princess stood there. Alone, no guards. She stepped inside without a word. Closed the door behind her. I am not supposed to be here, she said in a soft voice. But I need to know. The human looked at her calmly. Know what? He asked. Why? She whispered. Why would you choose to bond without knowing? My face. He smiled. Just a little, because it's not your face I'm interested in. He replied, it's your heart, your mind, your courage. The princess looked stunned. Even though her mask didn't show it, her voice shook. No one has ever said that to me before. She moved closer, just one step. I must tell you something, she said, her voice trembling. I'm not cursed. The room fell quiet. I wear the mask because they made me, she continued. They said the people would never accept me if they knew the truth. They said I would bring shame if they saw my real face. The human stepped closer now. Do you want to show me? He asked. She hesitated, then shook her head. Not yet, she whispered. Not here, not while they watch. He nodded. Then I'll wait. He said gently, I'm not afraid. Outside the window, the stars continued to shine. But inside, For the first time in her life, the masked princess felt something new. Hope asterisk the next morning. The palace felt tense. Guards watched every corner. Nobles whispered in tight groups, and the royal family remained behind closed doors. But deep inside the West Wing, the human sat calmly in his chamber. Waiting. He had not tried to run, not tried to question anything. He simply waited for the princess. And when the door opened, she came in, still wearing her mask, her movements. Quiet and graceful. She stood by the wall, arms folded, eyes behind gold. "I shouldn't be here again," she said softly. "But you? You didn't leave." The human smiled a little. "I told you, I'm not afraid." She looked down, her voice even lower now. "Most men begged to see my face. They said they wanted to know who they were marrying, and when I refused, they walked away, or worse, they vanished." He nodded slowly. "I've heard the rumors. People say your face brings death." She stepped closer, her fingers clenched tight. "Do you want to know the truth?" she asked, voice trembling. "There is no curse." The words hung in the air like thunder. "No curse." The human repeated, quietly. She shook her head. "There never was. My parents made it all up, and the council helped. They said I wasn't beautiful enough. They said I was born with blood they didn't want the empire to see." She looked away now, ashamed. "My mother is from a warrior tribe. My father is royal. But their people hate each other if the galaxy finds out. The empire might fall." The human frowned. "So they hide you," he said, "and lie to everyone about a curse." "Yes," she whispered. "And anyone who refuses to go along with the lie disappears. They're not cursed. They're erased." The human was silent, his eyes focused. "You brought me into something dangerous," he said slowly, "but I'm still here." She looked up at him, surprised. "Why?" she asked. "Why not leave while you still can?" He stepped forward now, gentle but firm. "Because you trusted me with the truth, and I won't betray that." There was a silence between them, but it wasn't heavy. It was full of something else, something warm and strange for the first time. The princess felt like someone saw her, not the mask, not the fear, just her. "But they'll find out," she said suddenly, panic in her voice. "The court, the council, they'll know I spoke to you again. They'll think you've seen my face." "I haven't," the human said, "but I will, when you're ready." She nodded slowly, her hands trembling. "Then we have to be careful," she whispered. "They're watching everything." Just then, a loud knock hit the door. The princess jumped, quickly hiding behind a curtain as the human opened the door. A guard stepped in, tall and serious. "The council wishes to see you," the guard said flatly. "Now?" the human nodded, hiding the worry in his chest. "I'll be there." As the guard walked away, the princess stepped out from the curtain, her voice shaking. "They know," she said. "They're testing you." "What should I do?" he asked, calm but alert. She looked into his eyes, her voice low. "Don't tell them anything. Don't ask to see my face. And don't ever mention the truth." He nodded, then turned toward the door. Before he could leave, she touched his hand. It was a small gesture, but it made his heart skip. "Be careful," she whispered. "They kill with silence here." The court chamber was colder than before. The council sat in a high arc of chairs, cloaked in deep blue robes, faces hidden by shadows. The king and queen watched from a throne above, their faces tight with false smiles, human. One of the council members began. "You still choose to bond with our princess?" "Yes," the human said clearly. "I do." "You still refuse to see her face first?" another asked. "I do," he answered again. The queen leaned forward. "And if her face brings death, will you accept it?" The human looked around the room, then spoke slowly. "If I die, I die. But maybe Just maybe. She was never the cursed one. There was silence, heavy and long, until finally the king spoke. The ceremony continues. He said with forced grace, "But understand, human, this is your last chance to run." The human only smiled. "I'm not running." Back in her room, the princess watched the stars. She didn't know what the human had said, but for the first time in her life, she felt like someone was standing beside her. Not out of fear, but out of choice, and somewhere. Deep inside the palace, the council whispered in private, "If the human keeps digging, he may learn too much. Then we erase him," someone muttered, "like all the others." But this time, the story was different. Because this time, he wasn't afraid. The palace was sleeping, but not at peace. Torches flickered quietly in the long marble halls, and the wind whispered through the cracks in the old stone walls, somewhere deep in the west wing. Behind a locked storage door, the human waited in darkness. The princess had told him where to go, an unused chamber beneath the gardens. Forgotten by most, old statues were covered in dust, vines curled through broken windows, and the smell of ancient air filled his lungs. He waited, patient, calm, even though he knew he was being hunted by secrets he didn't understand yet. Then the door creaked open and she appeared. Her golden mask glowed faintly in the moonlight, her long robes brushing the stone floor. She looked around nervously, then slipped inside and closed the door behind her. "Did they follow you?" she asked quickly. "No," he said. "I came the long way, through the kitchens." She exhaled slowly, the weight on her chest heavy. "I don't know how much longer we can do this," she whispered. "They're watching me more now." He reached out and touched her hand gently. "We'll figure it out," he said. "Together?" She nodded, then turned away and walked deeper into the room. "I brought you here because I want to show you something." He followed her quietly, past broken columns and ancient carvings, till they reached a hidden mirror behind a torn curtain. She stopped, her hand trembling as she reached for her mask. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "Not of you, but of what happens after." He said nothing, only waited, his presence calm and steady. She took a deep breath, then slowly lifted the mask from her face. It made a soft click as it came off, and she placed it carefully on a stone bench beside her. Her face was now revealed, lit only by the soft moonlight shining through the cracks above. She was beautiful, not perfect, but deeply beautiful. Her skin had the faint shimmer of her mother's warrior bloodline, and her eyes glowed gently, filled with fear and strength. She looked at him, waiting for his reaction. He stepped forward, looked into her eyes, and whispered, "You're not cursed." She blinked in surprise. Her lips parted slightly. "You're not afraid?" she asked. "No," he said softly. "Why would I fear something so human? Your face is not a weapon, it's a story, and I want to know all of it." Tears formed in her eyes, and she looked down quickly, wiping them away. "No one has ever said that," she whispered. "They always looked and turned away." He gently touched her cheek, and she didn't move away in that quiet moment. They weren't princess and human, alien and outsider. They were just two people, sharing something real. "I want to leave this place," she whispered suddenly. "I want to run away from the lies, the rules, the masks." He looked around the ruined chamber, then back at her. "Then let's plan it," he said. "We won't survive here if we keep waiting." She nodded slowly, hope flickering in her heart for the first time. "But I have to warn you," she said. "There's something else, something they don't want anyone to know." He raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" he asked. She walked to the far corner of the chamber and pressed her hand to a stone tile. With a soft rumble, it shifted, revealing a small hidden vault. She pulled out a glowing cube, flicked a switch. And an image appeared in the air, a hologram of her younger self, But she wasn't alone in the image. Beside her stood another girl. With the same golden mask, the human leaned forward. Confused? There were two of you? He asked slowly. She nodded, her voice tight. My twin sister, she whispered. She died when we were 10. But they used her image to strengthen. The curse story said she vanished after seeing my face. They used her death to keep me silent, to make people fear me even more. The human looked at her with deep sadness. I'm so sorry, he said softly. They turned your pain into a lie. She nodded, her fingers clenching. They told me if I ever revealed the truth, they'd erase me too. He looked her in the eyes, firm and clear. Then we'll expose them, but carefully. On our terms. Suddenly, a soft noise echoed. From the hallway above Boots, slow and heavy, the princess quickly grabbed her mask and put it back on. Go, she whispered, through the tunnel at the back. There's a servant's path that leads to the garden. What about you? He asked quickly. I'll distract them, she said. Pushing him toward the stone path, go, before they find both of us. He didn't want to leave, but she gave him one final look. Her eyes, still glowing with emotions, said everything she couldn't say aloud. He turned and disappeared into the darkness. She stood still, breathing fast, heart pounding. As the footsteps came closer and closer. Outside, the night was cold. The stars were bright and far beneath the palace. Secrets waited to rise into the light. The human crouched in the darkness of the hidden tunnel. Stone walls surrounded him, cold and rough, lit only by flickering lights hidden in the cracks. His hands brushed against old roots and dust. But his mind was not on the ground. It was on her, the princess, with her trembling voice and brave heart, had just risked everything for him. She had shown her face, her real face, the one no one else had ever seen. She trusted him, not just with her life, but with her truth, and now she had stayed behind to protect him. He moved quickly through the narrow tunnel, his breath quiet, his steps careful. He reached the exit behind the royal gardens, hidden beneath a broken statue. The night air hid his face. Cold and sharp, but filled with stars, he didn't leave. He stayed near the edge of the garden, hiding behind tall trees and watching the palace lights. He couldn't go far, not while she was still inside that place. Alone inside the palace, the princess stood near the broken chamber. 2 guards marched past her without stopping. They didn't question a masked royal, but her heart was pounding, her legs shaking. She made it out just in time. Back in her room, she locked the door, sat on the edge of her bed, and let the silence fill the space. She removed her mask again and stared at the mirror. The reflection was familiar, but it still felt strange. Her real face had been hidden for so long. Even she wasn't used to seeing it. Her fingers touched her lips gently, remembering the way he had looked at her. Not with fear, not with disgust, but with something else, something warm. Days passed slowly after that night. The bonding ceremony still continued, step by step, as required by tradition. But the council was watching closer. The princess was no longer allowed to walk freely. Guards stood near her door at all hours, and her movements were written in daily reports. Still, she found a way. Each night, when the guards changed shifts, she left a small message for the human. A flower near the old garden wall, a coin scratched with the royal symbol, a pebble placed in a pattern only he would recognize. And each time, he left something in return: a feather, a folded note, or a message carved in soft dirt. I'm still here. Their secret bond grew stronger. They never said the word love, not yet, but they both felt it, deep and quiet, like a spark hidden under ash, waiting for wind. One night, the princess slipped past her guards with the help of a sleeping powder she placed in their tea. She ran through the halls barefoot, cloak trailing behind her, until she reached the back garden. He was already there, waiting under the tall moonflowers. his eyes glowing in the silver light. "You came," he whispered. "I had to," she said, her breath fast, her voice full of emotion. "I couldn't wait any more." They walked together, hand in hand, past the flowers and old stones. No words were needed for a while. The quiet night said everything. Finally. Near the old fountain, she turned to him. "I've never felt this way," she whispered. "I've never been free with anyone." He stepped closer, brushing a leaf from her hair. "You're not a prisoner with me," he said gently. "You're just you." She smiled her real smile, soft and unsure, but beautiful. She looked up at him. And her voice trembled. "If we're caught, they'll kill you, I know," he replied. "But if I never touch your hand again, or hear your voice, then what's the point of living?" Her eyes filled with tears. Slowly, carefully, he reached out and cupped her cheek. She leaned into his touch, then, under the moonlight, with the stars as their only witnesses, he kissed her. It wasn't wild or desperate. It was soft like a promise whispered between two hearts that had suffered too long. She pulled back slightly, tears running down her cheeks. "I never wanted to bond with anyone," she said. "I thought it would be forced. Fake. Like everything in this palace. But now? I want it to be real." He nodded, his voice low. "Then let it be real." They sat by the fountain, speaking quietly until the sun began to rise. She had to leave before the guards woke. But before she stood, she placed her hand over his chest. "I feel safe here," she whispered, "in this strange place, in this dangerous bond. I feel alive." He gently held her fingers. "Then, stay alive," he said. "No matter what comes next, stay alive." She nodded, then ran back toward the palace, disappearing into the shadows like a ghost of the garden, and he sat alone beneath the fading stars, heart full, eyes wide, not knowing that the council had already begun their next move back inside the high tower. A noble watched from a hidden window. He turned to the royal advisor and said coldly, "They've crossed the line." The advisor nodded. "Then we cut the rope." The next morning, the palace was strangely quiet. Birds still sang, servants still walked the halls, and bells still rang at sunrise. But something had changed in the air, something heavy. Unseen, the human could feel it the moment he woke up. A coldness in the room, a silence too perfect. He dressed slowly, keeping his eyes on the door, and then came the knock, not soft or polite, but loud, sharp, final. 4 royal guards stood outside, their faces stiff and weapons ready. "You are ordered to the high chamber," one of them said without emotion. He nodded and followed calm on the outside, but inside, he knew they had discovered something. Inside the high chamber, the council sat tall and silent. The queen's eyes were like stone, the king's lips pressed tight, dozens of nobles lined the edges of the room, watching, whispering, judging. The human stepped forward without fear. "I was called," he said simply. "You were seen," the queen replied coldly. "Last night, in the royal garden," the human didn't answer. "You broke the rule of sacred separation," the king added before the final bonding ceremony. "The couple must remain apart." Still, the human stayed quiet. Then one of the elders stood, holding something in his hand, the princess's hairpin, the one she wore last night. "This was found near the garden fountain," he said. "She was with you?" the crowd murmured, some shocked, some excited. But the human didn't deny it. He looked at the king and queen and said firmly, "Yes, she came to me." Gasps echoed across the chamber. The queen stood in anger, her voice loud. "You seduced our daughter before the bond was sealed. You have broken our sacred law." "No," the human replied. "I loved her, and she came by choice." More gasps. Louder this time, the king raised a hand, and the room fell into silence. "Human," he said, his voice tight. You will be held for judgment, and if the bond is broken, you will be executed. The guards stepped forward and grabbed him. But the human didn't resist. I'm not afraid, he said, staring directly at the queen. And neither is she. Far away in her chamber, the princess was being locked. Inside, her mask was thrown across the room. Her hair messy from rushing out at sunrise, 2 royal handmaidens stood by the door. Silent and cold, her mother walked in, robes flowing, eyes like fire. You've disgraced us, the queen snapped. You let a human see your face, touch your hand, kiss your lips. How dare you? The princess stood tall, even with tears on her cheeks. I chose him, she said quietly. I want him not for power, not for duty, but because he sees me. The queen slapped her, not hard, but enough to sting. You speak like a peasant. She hissed. You are royal to your heart is not your own. My heart is mine, the princess replied. Her voice rising, for the first time in my life, it's mine. The queen turned to the guards. Lock her in the silent wing. She ordered. She will have no voice, no visitors, no light, until the human is gone. They dragged the princess away, her screams echoing through the halls. But no one came to help her. In the underground prison, the human sat on the floor of a cold stone cell. Chains bound his hands. Though he made no attempt to escape, a voice whispered through the vent, soft, breathless, weak. Can you hear me? It said. He leaned closer and recognized it was her. I'm here, he whispered back. They locked me away, she said. They want to break the bond. They won't, he whispered. They can't, unless we give up. I won't, she replied. Even if they blind me, silence me. Chain my won't stop. He smiled faintly. Touched the wall where her voice came through. Neither could see the other, but both felt closer than ever, suddenly. The wall above them shook, a loud bang echoing through the prison footsteps. Came running, guards shouting, doors opening and slamming shut. Then silence. Minutes later, a figure appeared at the door to his cell. An old servant, eyes full of fear, whispered, They've decided. What? The human asked, standing slowly. Tomorrow morning, the servant said, you will be executed in the court of light. The human said nothing for a moment, then nodded. Thank you, he said. Tell her, I don't regret anything. Then, servant nodded and disappeared, leaving the human alone again, but even in silence. His heart was not empty, because somewhere above she was still fighting, still breathing, still his, and though the empire tried to break them. The bond, the true bond, had already formed, not from law, not from blood, but from choice and love. The sun rose slowly over the Elorian palace, but today it did not bring light. It brought silence, heavy and cold. Guards moved with their heads low, nobles whispered behind closed doors, and the princess. She was gone from sight, in the center of the palace. The court of light was being prepared, not for celebration, but for execution. The stone floor was polished, the audience seats filled with lords and ladies, and at the front stood a tall block of white crystal. It was where traitors met their end, with bright light above and death below. In the dungeons beneath, the human stood tall. Chained at the wrists, his face was calm, even as 2 armored guards led him up the long spiral staircase. He walked in silence, each step echoing louder than the last. He did not beg, did not plead. He walked like a man who had already chosen his fate. The nobles were already gathered, their faces blank, their robes heavy with gold. The king sat at the center of the high court, the queen beside him, her eyes cold and dry. The council members stood around them like statues. Unmoving, uncaring, the human was brought to the center and placed on his knees. The executioner, a tall warrior with silver skin and dead eyes, stepped forward and raised his glowing blade. The crowd leaned forward in silence, waiting, and then a voice screamed, "Stop." Every head turned as a cloaked figure pushed through the guards. Her mask was still on, but her hands were shaking. Her breath fast. It was the princess. The guards tried to block her, but she shouted again, "Touch me, and the people will see." "What you're hiding?" gasps echoed around the court. The queen stood in fury. "You have no right to speak here," she snapped. But the princess didn't stop. She walked slowly to the center of the court, past nobles, past councilmen, past fear itself. She turned to the crowd, raised her trembling hands, and tore off. The mask, the golden mask, fell to the ground with a loud clang, and the court fell into silence. Her face was revealed to all, not cursed, not ugly, not twisted by dark magic. Just real, beautiful in its own way, but marked by her mixed blood, glowing eyes, and warrior heritage. "She is part warrior," someone whispered. "Half-caste," another muttered. "But she's not cursed," someone else breathed, stunned. The princess turned and faced the human, her voice loud now, clear and unshaking. "This is my face," she said, "the one he never asked to see." The human looked up at her, his eyes shining with pride. "And I would choose her again," he said. Every time, the queen shouted, "Enough." But the crowd didn't move. Something was changing. The lie was falling apart. People had seen the truth with their own eyes. "You created the curse," the princess said, turning to the council. "You used fear to control me, to erase those who loved me. You told the galaxy I was dangerous, but I was just your shame." The king stood, his voice booming. "You will destroy the empire with this madness." "No," she replied. "You already did that." The human was still on his knees, but he smiled. Because the empire had finally heard the truth, and they could never unhear it. Then something no one expected. One of the noblewomen stood from her seat and bowed her head. "I see no curse," she said. "I see a daughter speaking the truth." Another stood, and then another, soon. Nearly half the court stood in silent support, not cheering, not shouting, just standing. Enough to shake the balance of power. The queen looked around in disbelief, her mouth tight with rage. "Guards!" she shouted. "Take them all." But the guards did not move. They had seen the princess's face too. And they had felt something different to respect. They slowly lowered their weapons and stepped back. The executioner dropped his blade to the floor and walked away without a word. The princess stepped down and unlocked the human's chains with a key she had hidden in her cloak. He stood beside her, free at last. She turned to the court once more. "This is the man I choose," she said, "not because of law or tradition, but because he loved me without needing to see what others feared." The crowd said nothing, but the silence itself was powerful. Change had come, and everyone knew it. The king and queen stepped back, defeated but still clinging to power. The council remained frozen, unsure what would happen next. But for the first time in centuries, the people saw a royal without a mask. And they saw truth. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the news across the city. A whisper that grew into a wave. The masked princess showed her face. She wasn't cursed, she was betrayed. The humans stood by her, and in that moment, everything changed. For the first time in the long history of the Elorian Empire, the crowd left the Court of Light in silence, not because of fear, but because of awe. They had come expecting blood, expecting to see a human executed, but instead, they saw truth. Love and courage powerful enough to shatter centuries of lies. The human and the princess stood at the center of it all, hand in hand, no longer hiding, no longer afraid. The mask lay forgotten on the floor, broken. Just like the false curse it once represented, the king and queen disappeared from the chamber. That same evening, their rule was not officially over, but something had ended. They had lost the people's trust and that could never be regained with gold or war. That night, the human was taken not to prison, but to a guest chamber, one with light, clean clothes, warm food, and a view of the stars. He looked out the window and whispered, "She did it. She really did it." The next morning, bells rang across the capital, but not the bells of punishment or warning. These were softer, slower bells of change. The council, under pressure from both nobles and the people, called a public meeting in the Grand Hall. Everyone came. Royal families, warriors, scholars, even children stood outside the glowing steps, waiting, and when the doors opened, the princess walked out without her mask for all to see. Beside her stood the human, dressed not in chains, but in royal robes gifted to him that morning. A council speaker stood tall before the crowd. Voice clear, "Today, we face our shame," he said. "For years, we forced one of our own to hide in fear, to wear lies on her face, carry a curse that was never real." The crowd listened, silent and still. The speaker turned to the princess. "We offer you the chance to walk away, to leave this place and never look back." But she stepped forward and said, "No, I will stay. Not to protect a broken past, but to help build something new." Then she took the human's hand and looked at the council directly. "This man," she said, "is not Yalorian. He is not royal, not bound by our traditions, but he is braver than any warrior I've known. And he loved me when I was nothing but a mask. So today, I asked for something that has never been done before." She paused, her voice steady. "A new law," she said. "One that allows any Angelorian or not to bond by choice. Not blood." A murmur moved through the council seats, some shocked, others thoughtful. The council speaker looked at the princess, then at the human. "And what will you do if we say no?" he asked. She smiled softly. "Then we will leave," she said. "And we will take the people's hearts with us." A long silence followed, and then slowly, one by one, the council members began to nod, and the oldest among them, with silver eyes and a soft voice, spoke the final words. "Then so it shall be," he said. "A new law for love, by bond and choice, regardless of face or blood." Cheers rose from the crowd outside. People hugging, smiling, some even crying, for they had just seen something they never believed, possible change, born from love. Days passed quickly after that. The princess was no longer a mystery. She walked the palace halls with her head high, speaking to servants and guards with warmth. The human was always close, not as a shadow but as her equal. One evening, in the palace garden, the same place where they first kissed beneath the moonflowers, he knelt down on one knee, not because tradition demanded it, but because his heart did. He looked into her eyes and said, "Will you marry me not as a princess, but as the girl who took off her mask?" Tears welled up in her eyes, and she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times yes. Their wedding was held not in secret, but in the open court. People from every part of the empire came to witness it. There were no masks, no tests, no rules to hide behind, just two souls, two hands, two hearts finally free. The day after the wedding, the princess stood on the royal balcony and made one final change. She declared that all future bondings in the empire would be bi-mutual. Will only, no more forced unions, no more lies, no more masks, just truth. And as the stars above shone bright and the people below cheered, she looked at the man who had once said, "I don't need to see." And she knew he had seen her better than anyone ever had. No longer a cursed princess, no longer a silent girl behind gold. Now she was simply herself. And beside her stood the human who changed everything, not with war, not with power, but with love.